Well, hello, and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. Our goal is to help curious souls with your symptoms and just experiences that you're having with waking up spiritually and helping make sense of the paranormal and those glimpses beyond the veil. So we're delighted to have you with us. I'm Wendy Rose Williams. I'm a past life energy healer. I help people with anxiety, depression, pain and stuck energy. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Greg Kirk, my wonderful co-host, and he's going to introduce a really special guest that I met about 6 years ago, and I can't wait to get into it with him.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Kirk. I'm an energy worker, uh, healer, and Lyme disease advocate. I run a clinic in Connecticut called Lyme Recovery Clinic, where I help patients with herbal remedies and natural treatments. But I also do energy work in person and around the world through remote mechanisms like the phone or Zoom, like we're seeing here now. You can come and check out. I also run weekend online group healing circles, and in local here in where I live in Connecticut, fire circles. And you can click on the events page of my website, which is gregkirk.com. That's spelled GREGGKIRK.com. But right now, Wendy, let me pull up the deck here, and you can explain to everyone.
Absolutely. And while Greg is doing that, you're certainly welcome to listen to the podcast, but we also have a PowerPoint, and you're able to visit our website at wakingupspiritually.com, and there you can see the information. And Greg, just walk us through our introduction for today.
Yes, our interviewee is Dr. Chris Kerr. He's the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Executive Officer at Hospice and Palliative Care Buffalo, in Buffalo, New York, where he has worked since 1999. His passion is palliative care and belief that such care should be throughout the continuum of an illness. So that is end of life care for a patient. Dr. Kerr's background in research has evolved to focusing on patients' subjective experiences at the end of life. So to date, the research team at Hospice Buffalo has published multiple studies on this topic and documented over 1,500 end-of-life events, many of which are videotaped. This work was a subject of his TEDx Buffalo talk, which has been viewed 5.4 million times. It has been the subject of numerous reports around the world, as well as the BBC, NPR, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic Monthly, Scientific America, Huffington Post, New York Times Magazine, and Psychology Today. Is also featured in a docu-series on Netflix called Surviving Death and a PBS documentary called Death is But a Dream. He is also involved in a third documentary, Edge of Life, to be released in this year in 2025. Dr. Kerr's work has also been published in his book, Death is But a Dream, by Penguin Random House. So without further ado, let us bring in our special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris, you need to click on your video and audio links, and hopefully you haven't gone to go get coffee like one of our guests did. There he is.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome,
Great.
Chris. It is such a pleasure to have you here. And I had met Chris about 6 years ago when he was the headliner at an afterlife conference that we both attended in Portland, Oregon. And I just was fascinated by what he's done and continues to do, as well as his staff. And there's just a beautiful quote in your book, Chris. Well, there's many. Death is But a Dream, which I highly recommend for people to check out, Finding Hope and Meaning at Life's End, as well as Chris's TED Talk. And on page 82, you said there are no antidepressants or talk therapies that can match the astonishing capacity of the human soul to heal itself and find meaning, forgiveness, and peace at life's end. And a few paragraphs further, you said it's a universal phenomenon and it's always about love. So that is the intersection with what Greg and I are doing and what we're here for with Waking Up Spiritually. So take us back in time, Chris, wherever you'd like to go. What got you to answer that crazy ad for a physician in the paper going, really? An ad for a physician in a paper? What does a hospice doctor even do? Take us back wherever you want and just share some of those really meaningful stories of patients who've been your teachers, I think, about the human condition.
Yeah. Well, how I got here was most of this is what wasn't exactly planned. I was a cardiology fellow in the 90s and I needed to moonlight and I couldn't sleep. I was stressed and I saw this ad for a doctor. Ended up coming here, and medical school teaches you how to defeat death, not to manage it. And so I got here and I was stunned. I really, it, all this work, nothing I have done is it was learned in medical school or residency. It's really at the bedside of patients and mostly from my colleagues in nursing and spiritual care and social work. And what struck me was there was the dying that I was
Oh,
appreciate was that there was the patient's experience of death and that there was dying naturally is a different vantage point. It's going to change your perspectives. It's going to change your perceptions. And dying is mostly about progressive sleep. And within sleep, the architecture of sleep changes, and most people are experiencing something entirely different that's unshared when their eyes are closed, sometimes when their eyes are open, and it's powerful. And what happened was I learned just to not understand it, but to have reverence for it, because it was overwhelmingly comfortable. It had profound meaning to the person, in this almost life review sense. And what happened was I was trying to teach it to young doctors, and they would inevitably say, there's no evidence for this, when in fact it's always been talked about throughout time and across cultures, but not talked about necessarily in a scientific or clinical framework. So it was discredited. And it bothered me because it didn't honor what the patient was experiencing. So that's what began our work. We didn't discover anything new. We just put a different frame on the picture, and that's how it started. And it was kind of interesting. The work was originally meant for a medical audience, and we've published, I think, 7 or 8 papers to date, and it's never gotten a lot of attention in the medical world, but it's gone around the world, um, which is really telling, because what matters to the clinical world is not the same thing that seems to matter to the rest of us. Whether you're somebody facing, you're wondering about your own mortality, being a caregiver, having witnessed this. And I think what it did more than anything, it validated what so many people experience.
so what
And
were some of the things that resonate with the non-medical world but the clinical world is not that interested in? What were some of those?
I think what it did is it put dying as what it is, not a failure of medicine to cure, but a closing of a life and a very human experience. So somebody dying of kidney failure doesn't feel something different than heart failure. What they experience as a person is a closing of their life. Um, and I think the best way to say it is there's these processes, they don't deny death, but they affirm the life that was led. So there's this better story. And I think that's what resonated.
Right. So, so tell me about, as you got started with the research, was there, it sounded like you were just documenting things that you'd seen already in your job, but was there anything as you got started with your research that started to surprise you?
Well, yeah, it wasn't just what we assumed. We put a lot more rigor to it. So in our early studies, dying's a process. So we just wouldn't do a flyby. We would ask every patient every day with a standardized survey.
Mm.
So we put some quantification to it, and we ruled out every time we interviewed them that they were confused. So we screened them for confusion. We
Mm,
did labs. We look at meds. So we added clinical legitimacy to it by doing it that way. And frankly, we filmed people
right.
because we thought that we knew everybody would have a version of what a dying person looked like, that they were feeble-minded or confused. And in fact, these people were acutely aware and very introspective.
Right.
So humanizing it
Oh,
became,
the lucidity. I mean, that picture is worth 1,000 words, but yes, that
oh
film
yeah,
just, it's
yeah.
telling.
Yeah, it was the smartest thing we did, and we did it by accident. We did it because we knew doctors wouldn't believe us, but then it ended up becoming the basis for documentaries. So it ended up reaching an audience, just not the one we intended.
Right.
But
And what led to becoming part of Surviving Death, which shot to the #1 documentary on Netflix, I think to a lot of people's astonishment.
yeah, yeah, it just seemed to, it just immediately got our work seeped out into the non-medical community and took off. And I think it was really the film. Again, we didn't do anything spectacular. We just told a story.
Mhm.
But you asked like what surprised us was the frequency for one. When we asked people daily, 80+% people had at least one experience. And they increased in frequency as they approached death.
So
And
what do
we asked them daily, they could pick from a menu of what they were experiencing. And what was interesting is they got closer to death, the more likely they were to see people who they loved and lost. And when we looked at comfort, that gave them the greatest comfort. So as they're nearing death, they are ever more comforted by the feeling and familiarity of people that they've loved. And it focused on very specific people. Um, it's the people who truly loved and secured them. So that may mean one parent and not the other,
right?
two siblings, not the third. So it's time seems to be erased. We asked them other interesting things. We asked them on a scale of 1 to 10 to measure out the realism of it, and the most common number was 10. So this felt virtual to them, lived.
So you're talking about interactions with people who have passed on, who are coming to visit the
Yeah,
patient who is getting ready to pass. That's yeah.
yeah. I don't know what term you'd use. We're careful not to use, not to imply. We just use their words. So
Yeah.
they would refer to it as a dream or a vision, but then a lot of people objected to the word dream because they would say, no, it wasn't a dream, or I
They were
never
awake.
dreamed, or I never recalled. No, but it was half and half. When we asked them to tell us whether they were asleep or awake, it was exactly half and half.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Chris, could you speak to the categories that the dreams fell into, that were starting to comfort people and that they were experiencing more of? Because as you said, that progressive sleep.
Yeah, travel was a big theme. Getting ready to go, that metaphor was about a third, was in about a third. Um, Pets were huge. Again, another source of unconditional love.
Yeah.
Um, but mostly, far and away, it was people that they loved and lost. Some other characteristics. It's very, very different than near-death experiences. Almost no qualitative similarity at all.
Mhm.
So very little is said between the patient, the dreamer, and the person in the dream, but everything is understood. And they will comment if you watch our films. Majority of people say, "Well, they didn't say anything, but they gave me that look or that wave." Um, very different from near-death experiences that people don't come back and say, I was given some prophecy or revelation or commandment or reveal. It it's not overly romanticized that way. It's really about the simple, pure, wonderful parts of being alive, which are our relationships. Um, but they're, no white light tunnels, that stuff. And if you think about it, it makes sense. These people are not kind of clinically dying and coming back. They're dying.
Yeah.
And it would be cruel to be given them out like this sense of work or going back.
Right.
Right. I mean, they're tired. They're having trouble finding language, and they're dying.
Right.
So,
Yeah, they're leaving. They're not coming back to do a job.
yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
happens during the NDEs, I would
yeah.
suspect.
What's the
Um,
average length of stay, Chris, of people at Hospice Buffalo? Are they there for days, weeks, months, or is there some?
Yeah, the patients in our first study, I think it was about 2 weeks
Mhm.
before death. But then what surprised us was how many people were having these experiences when they came in. So we went upstream and we went is greater than 6 months and looked at those folks. And what we found was that there's a transition point. They go from kind of daily living concerns, practical matters, whatever dreams, to these sort of things within the probably a 2 to 3, 4 week period before death.
yeah. Hmm.
We had people, though, interestingly, who were dying, and they were having these experiences, and they had an infection treated, for example. Then the dreams went away, and then when they were dying, they came back. We had a number of those. So,
So they ended up leaving hospice, is what you're saying?
no, they were on a dying, rapid dying trajectory, but then they stabilized for a period of time to die again later, a few months later.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: the support staff that's around the dying person, is it all medical? Do you engage with any, so-called death doulas or end of life practitioners who are like on the spiritual side or the energy side? Do you have any of that support?
No, well, the hospice Medicare benefit is really a comprehensive model. So we have social work is paid for nursing, spiritual care, and volunteers. Doctors aren't actually. So it was never meant to be a medical model. And the unit of care is the family or the loved ones as well as the patient. No, we have doulas in our community. But I don't think it's my version. I'm not an expert by any means, but my version of the doula programs is there are places where it's roaring, and there's places like here where it's kind of scattered. And so we don't. I've certainly lectured with them, talked to them, but we don't actually see them in practice very often.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are the patients in a facility, if they're part of Hospice Buffalo, or are some of them at home, but
Yeah,
still
we care
under?
for about 11, 1,200 people a day. And the vast majority of them are in home. Some are in hospital, some are in nursing homes, but 90%, I would say, are at home.
Mhm.
All right. Well,
I think that's important for people to understand because they often think
Yeah,
of
yeah, I
hospice
think you're
going
right.
away to a location.
Yeah, yeah, it's both. You're right. It's a philosophy and it's a geographic location.
right. Right. Well, let's talk about some of the stories that are most memorable for you. What are some of the ones that really stand out that you would like people to know about?
Oh, I think there's a number, just going back to Wendy's original point about this idea that there's this in, inherent healing within these processes. You quoted that line about there was no antidepressants or whatever that it would have brought the resolution that these experiences did. And we saw a lot of that. So about, I don't know, 12, 13% were discomforting or neutral dreams. So the majority are comforting, but then there was a subset that wasn't. And but those are the most transformational. So whatever we're all harmed or wounded for having lived, and whatever that is, it's often addressed at the end in very interesting ways.
Hmm.
So, we had a mother whose child was in jail for drug-related offense, and her whole identity as a person and a parent was her issue. And in her dream, her parents come to her and tell her that she was a remarkable mother and she's loved.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, we had a lot of healing like that. We had a gentleman, for example, who lost his arm, blue collar family, he was 8 years old. And his whole question in development, when he was in development, was, how am I going to be independent, support myself, be of worth? And at the end of his life, all of his coworkers come to him and tell him he was the best one at the job.
Hmm.
So those are some of the ones that stand out. The other ones are often old wounds, lost child in birth, um, the sort of injury that never leaves us. And again, I said time seems to evaporate. Those reunions, that sense of them being present reoccurs. An old man, he's 95, and he lost his mother when he's 5, and he can hear her voice say, I love you, smell her perfume, all of those things. And again, it speaks to the lack of need to, I've never had a patient say, what do you think this means? You know, um, if that patient saw his mother, he knows what it's there. It's just
Right,
you don't need to be translated to.
right.
So
They're sharing their vivid experiences that they're, of course, the
belongs to them.
interpreter of.
Yeah, yeah, it just belongs to them.
Have your videos ever captured any phenomenon? While these interactions are going on, like orbs or anything moving?
No,
No? Huh,
no.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know other people talk about it, but
Yeah.
I haven't. Now, when I say that, it may be that I'm closed off to it. I don't know, but um, you hear of lore of the reporting of phenomena, temperatures, wakening of somebody who's like a loved one. They wake up with a sense, but no, not that we've certainly captured.
Okay. And what about, so you're talking about the healing with the patient who's passing. What about the healing of the support, the family who comes? Have you ever had situations where family have had a tough relationship with a person who's dying, and then they work things out, at bedside? I mean, do you document any of that kind of stuff happening as well?
No, I
Does
mean
that happen
that's a daily occurrence, right?
daily? Right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
would,
but
that's why
what
I
we
asked.
have done is we've published 2 studies of about 750 caregivers and looked at how these experiences affected them and their bereavement.
Yeah.
And the short version is what's good for the patient is good for their loved ones.
Mhm.
And how we see somebody leave us absolutely affects how we remember, how we grieve.
Mm.
And we have done studies that we look at, there's scales to measure the grief process. And people who have watch their loved ones have these experiences, grieve very differently and in more positive ways. Because death can be seen as something empty and devoid of meaning, or it can be seen as something very, very different. So again, what we witness matters. And so, yeah, this it's actually you can actually document and record and measure the effect of it. It's pretty interesting. And we have a lot of some of our best videos are of caregivers talking about what it meant to them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And where can people see more of these films, Chris? Surviving Death certainly is one place. Look for that documentary.
Yeah, the others you can go to. I think there's links to a lot of if you type hospice Buffalo and you search for videos under this topic, uh,
Okay,
there's a lot of our videos are posted on YouTube. The others, there's links on a site, and it's Dr. Christopher Kerr. Chris is with a C, Kerr, .org or .com, and that will get you to our website.
fantastic.
Yeah,
We'll
Because
include
you
those
really,
links. Yeah.
they're really
yeah,
compelling.
yeah. Because it's really, I won't never lecture without the videos because I can't do it justice. It's really important to hear from the patients and families.
So how has this work affected you personally?
Oh,
What?
it's a good question. I've done this. I've been a hospice doctor for 26 years, and well, one is certainly the obvious is that it takes away you have a different view of it. You're less fearful of the dying process. Um, but it leaves you with this idea that there is a better story, that those you love are never truly gone, that they're with you in one form or fashion. I don't know how, I don't know what it means, but their love is experienced and there for you. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Wendy and I did an episode years ago on, we called it dying lessons. We basically said everybody has a choice as you're watching somebody get ready to pass, especially in a hospital situation. One path is, grieving and trying to fight death and being upset and, looking at regret and all those things, or looking at it as a beautiful experience, like a birth, like a different form of birth where they're being born back to where they came from, and looking at it as one person gave me advice: why don't you help the death of your loved one become something beautiful? And I know it sounds like you're noticing differences, when people approach the passing of their loved one in using the ladder mentality of trying to make it something beautiful. I mean, is this something that you notice as well? I mean, is there any advice, to help?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I see it every day, particularly because we're pulling people out of environments like hospitals or nursing homes, right? There's a sterile institutional type dying based on organ failure.
Yeah.
And then there's the one where you're surrounded by your loved ones and you're not seen as an object of medical focus, but just as a person, not a patient.
Right.
And the American public is very clear. They don't want the doctor's death, right? They want one in which they're seen and they have a say. And this generation is starting to do that. You're doing it by doing these sort of podcasts and interviews. But you said the Death Doula program. That's an attempt to humanize what has become rather sterile.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I think these conversations are so important. Our parents' generation revered the doctor and did what they said. And this generation doesn't want that. They don't necessarily want to be in a nursing home, right? They want their own autonomy. They want to be seen as a person, not a medical problem to solve. So.
Right. Well,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Chris, you lost a parent. Your dad passed when you were young. You were only 12, was it? Do you feel that had any impact on your decision to become a physician, to become a hospice physician? Can you pull any thread there?
Yeah, you probably do a better pulling it than I would. But it's a funny story. We're a story. So no, I'm the fifth doctor in a row. So I don't remember anything else but
You're,
wanting to
you're
be.
fifth generation?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah,
Thank you. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Even had their diplomas. And
Oh,
um,
wonderful.
so I never knew anything but to want to do this. I had great examples, and it was seen as a privilege. And so yeah, I don't remember ever wanting anything else, and I've never looked back. Um, the fact I end up studying this is weird because and this is where you could make something out of this, is that my dad had last time I saw my dad, he was having an experience the night before his death, and I never really spoke about it, and it quite honestly unsettled me more than anything. And I was ushered out of the room, and all through my training, I was on the interventional side of medicine and kind of avoided the whole death thing. It was only because I saw that ad that I ended up doing it. And then when I got here, I'm seeing all these people doing what I saw my father do. And then I ended up this thing I was kind of avoiding, I ended up caring for these patients. And then I ended up trying to teach it and then studying it and publishing it. And so here we are. So it's been a weird, weird journey. Certainly wasn't my design. I mean, I have a PhD, but it's in neurobiology and bench science. So not this at all. But anyways, here's where we ended up. So
And again, I highly recommend your book. I so appreciate the humility of just some of the certainly the patient as teacher, but also some very wise nurses who had some things to say to you, I'm sure every day, but
oh yeah,
right.
this was entirely a nurse driven observation. And actually, it's an important part of the story because what happened was they could prognosticate better than I could when somebody was coming to the end of life.
Mm.
And that fascinated me. And the study showed that the markers they were using to prognosticate did actually prognosticate. So you asked about, what's that time? There is a time frame, and there is a frequency that's predictive. And they just use their clinical instinct to guide them and help them translate it to the family. So that was actually part of the whole process, but it was absolutely my non-physician colleagues who showed me this.
Wow.
Well,
So cool.
well.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you'd like to share with us, Chris? I could talk with you all day, but I know you're needed elsewhere too. Or Greg,
No,
you wrap?
I just say you did two other things I think are really important is that when we looked at this, we have a large children's population here, and they do this in very colorful, interesting ways. They may not have known a person who's died, but they know animals that have, and they come back with the same message that they're not alone, they're loved. The other is we did a study that looked at dying as in terms of post-traumatic growth, the idea that something positive can become out of what's seen as a negative experience. Is there growth? Is there understanding, for example? And that's what happened. People who are having these experiences were showing growth. The idea is that you don't stop living because you're dying, and you can gain insight and understanding right up until death. So it's inversion of death as this passive process only defined by its physical dimensionality, when in fact there's so much more to it.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having me, you guys.
Oh,
Thank you,
Great
Chris.
to see a fellow Canadian again.
yeah, exactly. Y'all got to hear our abouts and
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
So thank you so much, Chris, for
Thank
what
you.
you're doing and what your staff is doing. It's so important. And in many ways, it takes me back to 100 years or so ago, before both birth and death became such sterile hospital processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that there isn't a time and place for it. Sometimes it's very, very needed, or the person wouldn't be here with in the birth situations. But it's taking, I think, the fear out of it. I mean, people used to be they died at home with loved ones, and they were laid out in the living room, and everyone had an incredible party and wake, and it was a celebration of life before we more recently got that term. It's kind of like the wheel is
Oh,
turning.
yeah. Well, there's a great book. I'm looking over here to see the title. A guy by the name of a doctor by the name Seamus O'Mahony wrote this book, The Way We Die Now, which tells exactly that the normalization, the embrace of it as something we were witness to and we grew up with that's now gone. That's exactly what he writes about. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
thank you again, and we
Thank
will
you.
include the links. It was such a pleasure to
All
have
right.
you,
What a pleasure to
Chris.
see you. Thank you, you guys.
And
Bye
if you
now.
drop off, just our gratitude. Thank you for
Thank
being.
you.
All right.
And
Okay.
Greg, we should include the link to the podcast we did with Julie Ryan, because that conversation was coming up throughout my mind just multiple times with that incredible model that Julie Ryan, who's a gifted psychic medium amongst many other things. And she just built this beautiful model of how angels come in, as well as just the family members to assist with this process. So she has such a different, beautiful perspective on it. And we should have a death doula interviewee, Greg. That would be a natural next step.
Absolutely.
So please join me for upcoming events that you can find via my website at wendyrosewilliams.com. For instance, I'll be doing a group past life regression on June 21st. And part of what Chris was talking about here that really comes out in the book without him using these terms is, as people are dying, they really become time travelers. And they have these dreams, both in different levels of consciousness. So while fully awake, as well as during sleep, where they are different ages. He did allude to that briefly, so that that aspect is going on, because it's wherever people need to go back to find that comfort and peace. Something that happened when they were 9 years old, or when they were in their 20s, or whatever age it was. I'll also be doing a live channeling with the Ascended Masters and Angels on July 19th, how to connect with your guide, your spirit guide. Feel that unconditional love and wisdom. Don't we all need that? It's just a big deal. I'll be doing that on August 2nd. And Regression Healing 2, Joe and Marilyn, my third book, is now available in audiobook format, as well as in paperback and on Kindle. I so appreciate the kind review. Someone wrote, this book is impossible to put down. And the Kindle version will be on sale on June 1st, which would have been Marilyn Monroe's birthday.
Nice.
That's why I chose that day. It'll be just $2.99. You can enjoy some of the backstory to my Joe and Marilyn experiences on Wendy's Coffee House Curious. It's Wendy Garrett. To get 2 Wendy's for the price of 1 in that conversation. And I linked that podcast here.
Thank you. I'd also like to remind people that I have a book out. I published in 2018 called The Gratitude Curve. And it's about the story of me going through a Lyme disease struggle that turned into a spiritual awakening, and realizing that this was, as rough as the experience was, it was transformative, and my life changed for the better as a result of all these tough things I went through. So you can find it on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble now. It's also, you can purchase it on my website if you want a signed copy. And I am working on the sequel, the second book. Haven't come up with the title yet, but I'm about a little more than 3/4 of the way through. So I'm hoping that definitely before the end of the year, I'll be releasing that one as well. So
Fantastic. Look forward to it, Greg. And please join us on June 9th for our interview with a podcaster and author, Mark Gober. I think Mark has done one of the most compelling podcasts that I have ever had the pleasure of listening to. It's one series. There's 6 or 8 episodes, but each one has multiple interviews, and it's just beautifully produced. And Greg and I, in between now and then, we're also going to be doing our 5th anniversary. 5 years already, Greg. Oh my goodness. Time flies when you're having fun.
virtual high five.
Yes. So we'll be doing that also. And you can find, if you're not able to join us live, you're able to go to our website, as I mentioned, which is wakingupspiritually.com. And you can find all the podcasts there on the broadcast tab. You can also search for topics and areas that you need help with. If you'd like to connect with your guide, if you need help with an energy management practice, whatever it might be, past lives, whatever it might be, you can search on the website for that. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is linked here, and rate and review us on your favorite Apple iTunes or whatever your favorite app is, because that helps people find us. And visit Greg at his website, which is GREGG Kirk, KIRK.com, for all the wonderful things that he's offering and working on. And visit me at my website, WendyRoseWilliams.com, and join me for an event or for a one-on-one client session. So thank you, everybody. And it was such a pleasure to have you here. And warm gratitude again to our wonderful speaker today, to Dr. Chris Kerr.